All right, so welcome to episode 23 of the Honest Truth Podcast. We are here today with Sheila Schmidt, who is the founder, change agent, leadership, and development coach of the Kaizen Agency. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'm so jealous initially of the title that we were talking about, right? So I want to hear tell me about all the different things that go into, what Sheila is, who Sheila is, and how you name yourself.
Oh, that's a lot. I don't know if we have time for all of that today, Nick. In terms of Kaizen Agency?
Yeah, I want to hear about it.
Well, it started, I officially founded in 2019 as kind of a side gig, really, because I had relationships in the industry. I've been in the AEC industry for a long time, 20 plus years, and I had founders and CEOs of companies reaching out and wanting to know how I had been effective in years past when I was in business development roles of really creating a seller-doer environment in the firms that I had the pleasure to work with. So I went in on a contract basis and really set the way to put that forward in their company as well. Yeah. And fortunately had some success with that.
Awesome. So 20 years in the AEC industry. Can we hear about it? Like, what are these 20 years in the AEC industry?
Well, I started with a contractor in Detroit area and doing automotive work, really technical automotive work. Worked for them for a little over 6 years, and in the timing, the work had gone away. It was after 9/11, and opened an office for them in Biloxi doing FEMA work, came out here to Arizona in 2008, just before the bottom fell out. And the intention was to open an office here. That didn't happen because of what happened in the economy. Right. And I had been here for about 5 months and fell in love with Arizona, didn't want to leave. So I left the employer that I had been with for a considerable amount of time and stalked another contractor here to hire me and was able to convince them to bring me on. And I was with them in a business development role and teaching professional sales training and kind of collaborating. I was with them for about 6 years, a little over, and bringing multiple offices together, really to have a strategy from business development perspective, a bigger picture. From there, I did business development for a structural firm here for a year. 6 months into that, I was being recruited by a healthcare developer, by Ryan Companies, to help them start their healthcare development here in the Valley. I was with Ryan for 3 years, fabulous company. Then I got recruited to Meridian, and I still actually hold a consulting contract with Meridian, and I've been with them for over 5 years now. Another really great firm. They do healthcare specifically, and with them, I did more of cradle to grave, and then moved into more of a business development role again because it's my natural, happy place to be. And during that time, I was also taking on contracts through Kaizen. And I'm always telling my clients about how passion wins. Follow your passion, it wins. And truly, that's what I'm doing with putting my heart and soul into Kaizen.
Yeah.
So
it's so funny. I was literally just going to say, where did your passion pull you? Because in our experience over the last handful of months, passion is kind of, that's Sheila's word, right? Like, so passion is like how, kind of how we get to where we are. What about the industry in particular, and I'll say the words business development, which I think has a weird connotation in the industry, and I don't know that it's properly defined anywhere. What about that has kind of pulled you to determine that there's a whole market out there for coaching, training, teaching, emboldening in passion, so to speak, that's kind of led you to this adventure?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That's a good question. Really, I think it's, the companies that have come to me for this, I haven't necessarily pursued them. But what I end up finding out is when I get in and I look at the processes, and this goes back to when I was solely business development, I look at the processes in the company and not all the arrows are pointed in the same direction. So, as a business developer, it's frustrating when you're out like hustling and building these relationships and getting deals in the door or trying to, but you're getting roadblocks from your own company. So making sure that everything is aligned, and you've heard me say it a million times, like all the arrows have to be pointed in the same direction. Do the process of how a lead comes in the door and it's handed through the company. Does that align with the vision statement, with the compensation plan, with the performance evaluations? You have to look at it holistically and make sure that everybody is on the same board. And then if you have one person doing business development, it can be effective if you have the right person, but you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And if they leave and go to a competitor, that's a pretty vulnerable position to be in. So creating a seller-doer culture really creates buy-in. And I think you've seen some of this. I hope you've seen some of this internally, that it creates more of a cohesive culture because everybody's in it together. Yeah. And everybody has ownership of it. And even more so than that, I think it stems from people understanding the process more and everybody playing a role and taking pride in that. So.
Well, I think, general contractor, right? So we preach teamwork at every level except business development, right? So historically, we preach teamwork within our superintendent core. We preach teamwork within our project management core. We preach teamwork within our pre-construction core.
Right.
And we don't preach it within business development. How does that make sense, right? So it doesn't make sense that all of the ranks are preaching, teamwork, and then we're not doing it at the top. That doesn't make a ton of sense. And so that's been one of the eye-opening things for me, specifically over the last handful of months and I'll say years, like really learning about how true business development is formed. And even the word development, it's not a single point. It's not an initial touch point, a single rifle shot, so to speak, right? It's a true coercion of true development, a smattering of things that happens that's really, tenured and experienced and thought out and thoughtful. And I think that's kind of been a big change for us over the last, handful of years, is really learning that true business development is like farming, right? It's sowing a bunch of seeds and then seeing what develops. And so I think that's been kind of a big realization that we felt, specifically over the last, handful of months with your involvement within our team, obviously. But then also like just an understanding of the industry and how it works and single points of failure and all the different buzzwords you could insert here.
Right.
And kind of how it transpires, right? Yeah. No, I agree. So talk to me about what you're seeing in the industry. Why is the AEC industry kind of specifically ripe for this kind of training?
I think it actually transcends the AEC industry. When you really look at it, it's really professional service industry. So it could be, law firms, accounting firms, of course, architectural, construction, engineering firms. But any professional service, healthcare, we both know the healthcare industry really, really well. When you have doers, whether they're providers or they're architects or they're contractors, and they take pride in what they do, and that is what they define their role as being. When somebody comes to them and says, you need to like bring in work, or if they're paying attention, the people in the firms that do bring in the work may not be the strongest doer in that firm, but they bring in work. They're the ones that get promoted. They're the ones that are running the office, and they're the ones that are continually climbing that ladder. So when you look at that, and somebody is saying, well, you need to bring in work, how?
Right.
Nobody's teaching them. So you can't expect, an engineer or, any other professional service that has done extensive training and could be the best engineer or the best project manager or superintendent to naturally know how to sell. There are people like you that are very charismatic and it comes naturally to you, but it doesn't to most.
Right. Well, and I mean, some of the stuff that we've gone through over the last handful of months has been really, really inspiring to me, which is something as simple as you're at a barbecue and you're talking to, a friend, a mutual friend, a neighbor, whatever. What do you do? Well, I'm in construction. And it's like, I mean, opportunities, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many opportunities come from just handshake conversations in the weirdest of places? And I think it's more about an understanding of opportunity and a recognition of opportunity as opposed to, some sort of, definitive training. In this situation, you do this. In that situation, you do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so rigid and so just unintentional. But the ability to be coherent when the right opportunity is arising has been kind of the real thing that I believe that Venn has benefited from your training over the last handful of months is just the ability for the team to be aware. And maybe awareness is the right word. I don't know. I'm like kind of like spitting it out right now as I'm thinking about it. But maybe awareness is the right word of just be aware of the situation that you're in and take, survey and advantage of your surroundings and utilize that opportunity to the best of its, of its kind at that particular moment. And I think it's so funny because when we first brought you on to help with the team, there was some apprehension, right? There was some scared kids in the class
that were
100% like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to like talk to everybody? Am I gonna have to, am I gonna say these things or do these things? And true business development is actually the opposite of that. I mean, I think true business development is not the head of the spear, the lead singer of the band. I mean, true business development is awareness and understanding and cultivation of, where is this particular lead coming from? What does this client need? Where is an opportunity for us to succeed? And I'll tell you what, the biggest waste of time with a company, in my opinion, is pursuing leads that aren't available.
Right.
So let's be honest about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to win. And so, being able to pursue a lead in an opportunity in an arena that you can be successful in is traditionally the arena you're already successful in, right? And I mean, what's the buzzword? The cheapest client is the one you already have, or something like that, right? I think the right answer is to be aware of your surroundings and understanding of what's going on. So, within that, how have you walked into, I'll say, rigid firms? 'Cause I think we're a little bit of a rigid firm when you walked in. How have you walked into rigid firms like Venn that have their, quote, way of doing things and helped transform the environment?
I have walked into rigid firms, and I would say there was resistance when I walked in. I could sense that, but I would not consider this a rigid environment. I could tell you stories that they were very rigid environments.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is really having that mutual respect, sharing a little bit about where I've come from, what I've done, being successful, and that's not on me. It's like the whole team that I was surrounded with in times like through the Great Recession and, after 9/11. I'm aging myself here. But, I mean, those are really, really tough times in our industry. And when you are able to come through with that and you share those stories, it gives a little bit of validity, if you will. But even more so than that, once we start the dialogue, you saw it with your team, at least I hope you did, when when we came in and we were brainstorming about what is a lead.
Yeah.
What does a lead look like to resonate with when you mentioned awareness? It's so many people assume, like you and I, we're accustomed to bringing in work and identifying it. It's just somebody doesn't have to tell me. I just know. But we make those assumptions on others that they can identify a lead and they know what it means when, you see a big vacant suite in a building and things. So pointing out things that maybe they won't just walk past next time can lead to opportunities.
Yeah. Well, and I think the team just recognizing like there's maybe not an opportunity here today, but there's a clear future opportunity, right? Like, so you're in a brand new office building. We're doing the first spec suite. Well, let's be obvious here. I mean, there's opportunity in the building, right? So what are we doing to source leads within the property managers, within the brokers, within the owner of the building? Yeah, all the things. So the kind of the number one thing that we've chatted about here is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
I own a general contracting firm. Emotional intelligence is like maybe the scariest two words put together, in my entire life. So talk to me about that and how you use that as a advantage or as a focal point for your business.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, I lead softly with it because there generally is a little bit of like, I don't need that. It's the same with
There's a lot of that, by the way. There's a lot of, there's a lot of fear and a lot of, I don't need that from guys like me in the world. So yeah, go ahead.
It falls in the same line with leadership and performance coaching as well. I don't need that. I don't need that. But really looking at emotional intelligence is, I think a lot of people for so many years, all the studies would point toward IQ. If somebody's really smart, they're going to be good at whatever you put them, whatever direction you point them in. But more and more research has come to light, and especially in the last 3 to 4 years, on emotional intelligence and what a profound impact it has on performance and success of teams. And basically, in the simplest of forms, it boils down to not having our emotions control us, but to be able to identify and react and use our emotions in a healthy way to increase performance and output, really. In doing so, you strengthen relationships unbelievably. I know when I came in, I mentioned to your team more than a few times, like, once we get through this, your lens is going to be different. You're not going to see things the same way. Have you had any of those experiences?
Too many to count. I think for me, I don't know that you ever said this directly, but how I received it, I guess, is what I'll say. I felt like you were very excited to come and work with Venn.
I am.
But you also really wanted to make personal coaching a part of the repertoire, or it was kind of like, if we're not going to do the personal coaching, I'm not excited. And I realize I'm paraphrasing here, but like in my mind, it was like, we're going to do the personal coaching and the company seller-doer coaching, and it has to work together.
Right.
So total transparency, my initial reaction was like, well, I don't want to do the personal coaching.
Oh, I could tell. I could tell. You're like, I do not need executive coaching. I don't need without saying it. I could tell. I do not need performance coaching. I don't need leadership coaching.
Fun fact, totally do. But there's apprehension there, right? Because it's like, all right, so we were going through a little bit of a transition. We wanted to like transform our business development model. Right. A ton of high recommendations in our relationship. So we bring in, Sheila and Kaizen, and it's like, hey, let's get this figured out. And then you were like, great, so we're going to schedule your personal coaching sessions. And I was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that.
For the record, you didn't say you weren't going to do that. You just didn't.
Yeah.
I stalked you.
What do they call it? Quiet quitting?
Yes.
I quiet ignored you. But I've noticed that the two things have to go hand in hand. And I really have, I think for me, the number one change has been understanding the generational gaps and how to bridge relationships with employees in different generations. So, construction may be, kind of one of the last of the industries that still has this huge broad gap of real, true difference in generations.
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
4 generations in my workforce. I don't know how you determine generation, but there may be 4 or 5 generations, in Venn's, group of folks, and there's only 30 of us. So, how do you handle the delta of 5 generations with the same message, the same understanding, and you're dealing with multiple generations, right? And so for me, that coaching and that sensitivity, I tend to not be so sensitive with most things and then overly sensitive with others. And so, to understand that whole process, I think was probably the most beneficial thing for me, because most of the I'll say the next generation of Venn obviously is on the, is in the newer generations. Right. Obviously, as your company grows, that's what's going to happen. And then I'm becoming part of the older generation, which is something that I don't love, but is also happening, And for a guy that was always the youngest guy in the room, I'm becoming the oldest guy in the room now. And
you're a long way from that.
Well, we'll get there. But it's just interesting, I was having some challenges. I was having some relational issues, within our group, not intentionally, not, anything overly negative, but because of generational gaps. And I think for me to understand and to maybe be a little more empathetic towards the generational gaps was important to me. So that was probably the number one thing that I have picked up from it and utilized in my management style moving forward. That's been actually really, really beneficial.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah. So is that common? I almost said, is that normal? That's a weird thing to say out loud. So is that common, and how do you, what kind of things do you bump into when you walk into different places, different industries, different companies that you have to whittle out?
I think that was an insightful question. Thank you. I think for the most part, that could capture it. But it's really, when you grow your emotional intelligence, when you grow your EI aptitude, you tend to be able to reframe things, and that's where the empathy comes in. You can look at things from somebody else's perspective and not only see it from your experiences. And whenever you can do that, you're going to relate and connect with people on a deeper level and in a more meaningful level. So when people feel understood, they approach you differently. And so it kind of transcends relationships. And if that's an area that you saw the growth, that's fantastic. I see the growth even in just different personality types. And I know people go through, and do personality like DISC assessments and things. And those are great. But I still think that growing your self-awareness and your social awareness and your empathy and self-management, those things that are like the backbones of EQ, really would transcend all personality types. It sounds a little kooky, a little fuzzy, but if everyone grew their EQ, it would be a much nicer place in this world. So
my experience, you came in and you kind of got the lay of the land, right? And kind of understanding each of our personalities and the situation that we're in. I'm going to use the word forced. I don't mean it negative. You immediately forced the compilation of a true vision statement, and didn't necessarily, the understanding was we need a compiled, concise, really, really targeted vision statement.
Yeah.
So my initial response when you said that was, we already have one. And I couldn't find it.
Your initial response was to ignore me.
Oh, come on. That's hurtful. You're probably right. I felt like we had an understanding of our vision statement, right? And I felt like we had an understanding of the process. I felt like we had I think the answer was, well, everybody knows what our vision statement is or something along those lines, right? Something really negative. But you push the issue and you push it in the right direction, and I'll say forced us to come up with, a true vision statement. So help me understand, before I give my answer, help me understand the value behind a true vision statement and what that represents for specifically a growing company.
Yeah, thank you. I think not only the vision statement itself, but how it's conducted is really, really important. And you're obviously running the company, so you know exactly what that vision is and what that means for you. But when you look at your employees and your whole team, they don't necessarily know what thoughts you have in your mind. And it's really important to give people the dream, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds kooky, but giving them the dream. They need to know that they have a future here and where they're headed, to know if they're aligned in the right direction. Again, the arrows all pointing in the right direction. But if you don't have it spelled out and you don't put it on paper, you're not holding yourself accountable either. And there's something to that of inking it, which I know there was a little resistance to initially. But once you did, I felt like there was complete buy-in with the leadership team, and then as it was rolled out.
Yeah, I honestly, I was amazed. I truly did not believe it mattered as much as it did, right? And so when we put that down on paper and then we compiled it and delivered it to the staff, we had a really powerful meeting, I felt like, and it was a really, really good time for the team to come together.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times in a small company, and I'm totally guilty of this, I just kind of feel like everybody knows, like you said, right? Like I just feel like everybody, like I'm not quiet. I don't keep things inside. I don't feel like there's secrets. But when there's not a stated full message, inherently there are secrets, right? Or whatever that version of a secret is, right? Inherently there's something that's maybe held back. What is the vision? And there can still be trust, and there can still be health, and there can still be all these things that are positive.
Right.
But until that vision is fully stated and documented, and the other thing, just, my brain not fully comprehending, it's an internal thing. And I had in my mind the vision statement as an external thing.
Right. And
why would I tell the whole world what our plans are for the future, right? Why would I show the defense what I'm going to run on offense? And there was some of that I was using internally as well, incorrectly, obviously, but still, I was holding back a little bit from kind of like releasing that. Again, why the personal coaching goes with the,
I'm going to jump in a little bit there, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Two things. The vision statement can be internal and external. In this case, I felt like it was more appropriate for this to be an internal vision statement. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you say that you knew where the company was going and what your vision statement was, and I would challenge that a little bit, because when I first walked in the door and I sat down with you and each of your individual teams, your leadership team individually, and did basically a deep dive interview, you had a different vision in mind for the company, and that kind of evolved through our strategy sessions and our poll planning sessions.
100%. Initially, it did for sure. Yeah. And I don't know that I was fully transparent with all of with the whole team during the process either, which I think was another kind of evolution through the process. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, so I think that is a lot more common than what people want to acknowledge until they themselves go through it. Because I've only had one firm that I've worked with that had all of those arrows pointed in the same direction. So you're not alone in that regard. But looking back on it, you said, well, I thought everyone knew, but you didn't know at that point.
Well, and, it's always like, ask me what my 5-year plan is every year, right? It was kind of one of those things where it's like our business has been so accustomed to transition.
Right.
And in growth mode and whatever mode you want to call the last handful of years that it's been, we've been adjusting our 5-year plan every year. And so I think for the first time now, through the genesis of the business, through the, obviously the passing of Bo and the kind of resetting and re-foundationalizing, if that's even a word, of the business, like we finally have an opportunity to point the arrow. But there was a lot of excuses in there before. And so I think now, like, this excuse removal process has been really beneficial. We've been able to point all the arrows in the right direction.
Yeah, your firm is, and I'm not saying this because I'm sitting across from you right now. I told a different construction company this same thing last night. I've seen behind the curtain now, and the firm is amazing. And you and the rest of the leadership team have done a really incredible job with building a culture that is really unique and how much your people care, not only about the clients, but about each other. It's just a really wonderful place to be. So I appreciate you welcoming me in and letting me work with your team. It's been fantastic.
I will tell you, I appreciate that. I will tell you the growth and the excitement that I've seen kind of reinvigorated in the business after this seller-doer training has been really, really exciting. And so, the amount of phone calls I'm getting from superintendents, project engineers that are, walking the job site and, hey, I heard about this and this architect is going to do this project next and whatever. And it's like, it's so fun. And the exhilaration and kind of building towards tenacity with these folks to really look out for the next benefit of the company is unique. And I completely believe that's because of the training that you're doing and all of the expertise that you're providing. But the excitement is something I didn't anticipate. And so that's been really fun.
It has been fun.
Yeah.
Even from the first meeting when there was a little more than a little bit of apprehension to, the consecutive meetings thereafter, your team has been leaning in.
Yeah.
Definitely they're leaning in, and
They're
seeing
excited,
that, and I think it's great.
And so after we produced the vision statement, we produced an org chart of the company's growth over the next handful of years. And one of the fun things, obviously, the company's projected to grow. And so we projected open spots.
Yeah.
And, here's internal growth. Here's potential outside hire growth. But here's open spots for you to progress.
Earn it.
Yeah, earn it. And the excitement level, I did not anticipate. I always felt like with a small to mid-sized company that people just kind of understand that growth is there. And then I've learned that I'm not allowed to say people just kind of understand. And so, putting that on paper and putting that on, even a board that's sitting in our break room today, here is the projected growth plan for the company. I joke with a lot of people, but I say that Venn is kind of a choose your own adventure. And, you get to come here and choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. And how that happens is really up to you. God forbid it's up to me all the time. That sounds excruciating. But it's a choose your own adventure for the most part. And now we've kind of laid, the adventure out on paper.
You have a really unique entrepreneurial spirit in the company. And I think from, the snippet of it that I've seen with your team, this is giving them an avenue to really pursue that.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
I think so too. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm appreciative of the effort and the insight that you've provided for us. So as we move forward, what's your advice to companies that are maybe stuck or kind of in this business development quagmire of how do I move my business forward? How do I create a culture? That sounds like a super daunting task. I think we hear about all these companies and all these cultures that they just magically exist.
I know.
They don't magically exist.
They don't. They don't.
So what's your advice as we kind of get ready to round up here? Like, what's your advice for companies that are looking to create a culture, enhance a culture? Mm-hmm. How can you help? How, what do you think?
Thank you. It's the one thing that I would advise, and I see people, like companies do it over and over and over, is they'll bring someone in to just do like professional sales training and think that's going to solve the problem. If you're really creating a seller-doer culture for a professional service company, you've learned this, you've experienced it, it's a full-on change initiative. This is not, something that you just give some training and then go away. It's looking at the processes of the company, looking at the leadership, looking at themselves, being willing to grow and get a little uncomfortable, which your team has been fantastic with that. They have. I mean, they've leaned in, and they write to me about advancements that they're making with EQ, growth, and I can tell in their coaching like where they've come from where we've started. So just try to use, what is it? Not a shotgun approach. It's
a rifled approach. Yeah.
Rifled. Try not to use a rifled approach, but use some. What's the bird stuff?
Well, more of a shotgun birdshot approach, right?
There you go, birdshot. There you go. Oh my gosh. So look at it holistically rather than just trying to provide sales training and think that's going to solve the issue. I
mean, when I first called, I thought we were under a rifled approach process.
I know you did.
Yeah, it's true. So it took that coaching. I mean, that's what this is about. No scary here, but I thought that we were looking to solve a singular problem, challenge, issue, whatever word I'm supposed to use. But the thought process really was there needs to be holistic understanding and holistic change of what are you really trying to do, and how are you really trying to solve the problem that you're faced with, and if everybody doesn't play the game, you're not going to win, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's really the mindset, right? Is like making sure that companies are fully bought in. I think for guys like me, the understanding of there's a lot more to it than just saying like, teach my team to sell. So what would you say to the guy, it's not me, that says teach my team to sell? Go pound sand?
No. I think it's a. I would want to meet with them and meet some of their people. If it's me, there are other change agents out there.
Yeah.
But I would want to meet with some of their leadership team, and make that assessment before I could, know what would be most beneficial. But again, I would stress it's not just. If you're just going to bring in somebody and do sales training, or even do just sales training internally, that time would be better spent somewhere else, because they're going to sit through it. They're going to say, oh, I can do this, and then nothing will be done. The little books will be set to the side, and it'll go right back to how it was before.
Yeah.
But to truly implement it, you have to look at processes, systems, people.
All of it.
You have to do full-on training, and where I've seen the most benefit, like I said with you, the leadership and performance coaching is really key to weave into that, to have the long going.
I mean, I'll just be arrogant and say I feel like we have a good culture.
You do.
And so to bring in that kind of training with a group that already has a good culture, we still experienced wholesale change. In the process of experiencing wholesale change. And so I think that is something that I'm wary of, and thought, really thoughtful about, because having good culture is not just like a snap your fingers kind of thing. No. Like, it truly requires diligence and effort.
It does.
And so to say that, well, we have a good culture, so let's just keep moving on. And then the company's going to grow. Mm-hmm. And just like anything else, like you start adding more people, then there's delusion of that culture. So you have to be intentional about keeping and retraining and understanding that culture. And so I think that's been probably that, in addition to the management of the generational gaps, have been a couple of things that I've been really focused on and really found beneficial through the EQ training. And I think that, I don't know there's a business that doesn't need it. I've been around a lot of companies, a lot of businesses. I don't believe there's a business that doesn't require it in some way, shape, or form, even the ones that are doing well. It's like going to the gym, right? Like you gotta keep at it, you gotta keep working, and you gotta stay kind of stay where you need to be. So I appreciate it. We've been truly, truly grateful for, I think, the growth and the experience that our company's received. And I would really encourage other folks to get on board for sure.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I would, again, seeing behind the curtain with Venn, highly recommend your team for any construction project. The passion and how much your team cares. I mean, huge kudos, because that doesn't just happen. I mean, that's leadership driven. So congratulations on that.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sheila. This has been episode 23 of the Honest Truth Podcast.
Thank you.